foundation.
Ah.
But nobody seems to see it. So.
Right.
Okay, so we are live now.
Okay, very good.
So thank you, devotees. We are very fortunate and very much blessed. We have Hare Krishna, Mother Rukmini Devi with us today. And she is going to help guide us through the nectarian, amazing SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. So we should all try to pay very close attention. And Mother, without much ado, I think I'll put the verse on the screen and then we may begin.
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right. Thank you very much. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, text number 18, Parikshit cursed by a Brahmin boy. Sutta uvacha aho vayam janma britodya hasma vridhanuvrityapi viloma jataha dauskulyamadim vidyunoti sigram mahatamanam abhidhana yoga. I think I'll say it 3 times. Sutta vacha aho vayam janma britodya hasma vidhanubrityapi viloma jataha dauskulyamadim vidunoti sigram mahatamanam abhidhana yoga. Sutta vacha aho vayam janma britodya hasma vidhanuvrityapi viloma jataha dauskulyamadim vidunoti sigram mahatamanam abhidhana yoga. Translation. Sri Sutta Goswami said, O God, although we are born in a mixed caste, we are still promoted in birthright simply by serving and following the great who are advanced in knowledge. Even by conversing with such great souls, one can without delay cleanse oneself of all disqualifications resulting from lower births. Sahadev Prabhu, was I supposed to chant the word for word? Should I go back and do that? Do you usually do that?
No, you don't have to. Some devotees don't. So
okay.
You're good. Yes.
Okay, well, it's always good to look at those words. Okay. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Sutta Goswami did not take his birth in a Brahmana family. Let me just put my marker in here. He was born in a family of mixed caste or an uncultured low family. But because of higher association, like Sri Sukadev Goswami and the great rishis of Nayamsharanya, certainly the disqualification of inferior birth was washed off. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followed this principle in pursuance of the Vedic usages, and by his transcendental association, he elevated many lowborn, or those disqualified by birth or action, to the status of devotional service and established them in the position of acharyas or authorities. He clearly stated that any man, whatever he may be, Whether a Brahmin or Shudra by birth, or a householder or mendicant in the order of society, if he is conversant with the science of Krishna, he can be accepted as an acharya or guru, a spiritual master. Sutta Goswami learned the science of Krishna from great rishis and authorities like Sukadev and Vyasadeva, and he was so qualified that even the sages of Naimsharanya eagerly wanted to hear from him the science of Krishna in the form of SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. So he had the double association of great souls by hearing and preaching. Transcendental science, or the science of Krishna, has to be learned from the authorities, and when one preaches the science, he becomes still more qualified. So Sutta Goswami had both the advantages, and thus undoubtedly he was completely freed from all disqualifications of low birth and mental agonies. This verse definitely proves that Srila Sukadeva Goswami did not refuse to teach Sutta Goswami about the transcendental science, nor did the sages of Naimsharanya refuse to hear lessons from him because of his inferior birth. This means that thousands of years ago, there was no bar to learning, or need you to scroll up here. There was no bar to learning or preaching the transcendental science because of inferior birth. The rigidity of the so-called caste system in Hindu society became prominent within only 100 years or so, when the number of Dvija bandhus, or disqualified men, in the families of higher castes increased. Lord Sri Chaitanya revived the original Vedic system, and he elevated Thakur Haridas to the position of Namacharya, or the authority in preaching the glories of the holy name of the Lord, although His Holiness Srila Haridas Thakur was pleased to appear in a family of Mohammedans. Such is the power of pure devotees of the Lord. The Ganges water is accepted as pure, and one can become purified after taking a bath in the waters of the Ganges. But as far as the great devotees of the Lord are concerned, they can purify a degraded soul even by being seen by the lowborn, and what to speak of association. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to purify the whole atmosphere of the polluted world by sending qualified preachers all over the world, and it remains with the Indians to take up this task scientifically and thus do the best kind of humanitarian work. The mental diseases of the present generation are more acute than bodily diseases. It is quite fit and proper to take up the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world without delay. Mahatamanam Abhidhana also means dictionary of great devotees, or a book full of the words of great devotees. Such a dictionary of the words of great devotees and those of the Lord are in the Vedas and allied literatures, specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangolam Gayate Girim Yakripastamang Vandhe Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sasyastu Visvasya Kalo Prasidatam Danyantu bhutani shivam mito diya manascha bhadram bhajata tadhoksaje aveshatam no matirabhya hoituki. May the entire universe be blessed with peace and good hope. May everyone driven by envy and enmity become pacified and reconciled. May all living beings develop abiding concern for the welfare of others. May our own hearts and minds be filled with purity and serenity. May all these blessings flow naturally from this supreme benediction. May our attention become spontaneously absorbed in the rapture of love unto the transcendent Lord. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vindam. And here's one other beautiful verse from Sanatana Goswami speaking about the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, O Srimad Bhagavatam, my only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for inviting me to Africa once again. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And I didn't even have to get on a plane. It's wonderful. Haribo, thank you, Sahadevan. Thank you to all the devotees. Yeah, so in this verse, we're hearing about Sutta Goswami. He was the son of Roma Harshan Sutta. Does anybody remember the story of how Lord Balaram killed that Roma Harshan Sutta with a blade of kusa grass? Just because he was a bit arrogant and he didn't stand when Lord Balaram came into the assembly. So this Sutta Goswami is the son of Roma Harshan Sutta, and Lord Balaram put him on the Vyasasana after his father, so unceremoniously was killed, right? So what does it mean to be a sutta? It's kind of a description of a servant class. Like if any of you are familiar with the Mahabharata, Karna was not eligible to fight with the Kshatriyas. Draupadi wouldn't accept him, and the Kshatriyas wouldn't accept him to fight as a Kshatriya because they understood, or they thought he was the son of a chariot driver or the son of a sutta. He was actually the son of Kunti Devi and the eldest of the Pandavas, but everyone thought at that time that he was a sutta, so he was considered ineligible to act and fight as a Kshatriya. So Sutta Goswami is saying in this verse that although he's speaking very humbly, and he's saying that although he's actually disqualified by his mixed lower birth, I forget which way it was. His mother was one and his father was one, but he wasn't like a pure Brahmin. But just by serving and following the great ones who are advanced in knowledge, even just by speaking with them, someone becomes cleansed of all disqualifications of lower births. So I was thinking this is a very perfect verse, a very pertinent verse for all of us, because that's us, right? Like here I am, I'm an American woman here speaking to mostly African men and women. So by birth, someone could say that we're all disqualified. But this is so extraordinary, the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, the mercy of Srimad Bhagavatam, that by hearing, by serving, by following the great ones, we are being accepted in this line of Bhagavad Dharma. We can speak and hear and imbibe Srimad Bhagavatam. So such extraordinary mercy, right? And if only high caste, high-born Brahmins were qualified to hear and to speak Srimad Bhagavatam, why would Srila Prabhupada even bother coming to the West? Why did he take so much trouble, right? To come to maybe the most fallen city in the whole world, New York City. he specifically targeted that he was not going to England where his godbrothers went, but he went to New York City. And destiny arranged everything so miraculously for him there. There was such an uprising of the youth at that time. And why did Srila Prabhupada come to Africa 4 times? Srila Prabhupada traveled to Africa 4 times. If he didn't care about the African people being empowered to hear and to speak Srimad Bhagavatam, why would he have bothered, right? So this is a very important, essential message of Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revived the original Vedic system. And this is his message to his authentic followers who follow him in disciplic succession. And this is the message of Srila Prabhupada. And in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, we see the so-called untouchable, right? So-called untouchable, low-caste Muslim, Haridas Thakur, he's dancing. And he and Advaita Acharya, who's from the highest Brahminical caste, they're dancing together and they're embracing each other. They were the best of friends. So this is the example that we have to follow. This is the essence that we're meant to learn. But some materialistic caste-conscious Brahmins in those days, if even a shadow of a low caste person, so-called low caste, untouchable person, if even a shadow of a person would touch them, they would run and go take a bath in the Ganges. And even today, there are people who are still thinking in such a sectarian way. But the pure path of bhakti is Bhagavat Dharma, and it's beyond all these mundane considerations. I was just listening the other day to a talk by Srila Prabhupada, and he was talking about how everyone in the world is so eager for a classless society. Right? Karl Marx talked about a classless society. This was sort of the basis of communism. But Srila Prabhupada was making the point that a classless society is really only possible in the spiritual world or in a truly Krishna conscious society. So this example of Advaita Acharya, this high caste Brahmin dancing with the so-called embracing and dancing, touching the so-called untouchable Haridas Thakur, this is the example of the pure spiritual world that we see given in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, or as Srila Prabhupada taught us. Because otherwise, if we don't see that way, there will always be some kind of discrimination of someone is higher, someone is lower, if we lack that authentic Krishna consciousness. You know, here in the US, I don't know if this is going on in Africa also, but in the US right now, there's a big phenomenon that government and companies are being sued and criticized for unfair discrimination and abuse against their employees. So they're trying really, really hard to institute departments of, they call it DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The accessibility part comes in when people who maybe have to use a wheelchair or something can't get up steps. But they're having such a hard time instituting these things. And why is that? Because they don't have the spiritual basis. They don't understand that only when we honor the same sacred spirit soul within the heart of every living being can we have that real inclusiveness. Yeah, because otherwise, materially speaking, there's always going to be someone who's more or less intelligent, someone who's more or less capable, more or less beautiful, someone who has more wealth, someone who has less wealth. And the true equality is the equality of the soul. And Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita in the verse about Varnashram, where he explains what Srila Prabhupada calls Devi Varnashram, or the divine Varnashram, that society should be divided according to people's behavior and their actions, not by their birth. Yeah, so I don't know if any of you might have heard the story of this. There's a deity in South India in a place called Udupi. This is the place of Madhvacharya, And there's a beautiful, beautiful Krishna deity there. It's said that he belonged to Rukmini Devi in her palace in Dwarka. So it's Krishna churning the butter because she wanted to see Krishna as a cowherd boy. She didn't have that darshan herself, and she wanted to get that vision of Krishna's childhood pastimes. So this beautiful deity that's there, there's a story in the temple, a very famous story that originally they would only allow high caste people in the temple. And there was a very great devotee who was a low caste person. He was, I believe he was a Muslim by birth. And he was a poet and a very great pure devotee. He wasn't allowed in the temple because of their mundane caste restrictions, but he would sit outside the temple and sing. And he wrote and composed beautiful, beautiful poetry out of love, ecstatic love for this beautiful Krishna. And what happened was, I don't know if any of you have heard this story before, but what happened was the deity actually turned around to face the wall where that devotee was outside singing his beautiful poetry and bhajans. So nowadays, even today, if you go to see that deity, he's not facing the front of the altar. He's facing the side, and they made a little window. And in order to see him, you have to peek through that window because he was so attracted by the love of this so-called untouchable devotee that he turned around and he's facing that where that devotee used to sit and sing to him. So that's such a great example. What does Krishna see? As he says in Bhagavad Gita, he sees our actions, he sees our heart, right? He doesn't see the mundane birth or academic degrees or wealth or power or position, right? So this is really an important story. And this is a story that gets told again and again in the pages of SRIMAD Bhagavatam and the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada as well. So here in this chapter, we're seeing that all these great sages, highly realized sages and great rishis, they're all eager to hear from Sutta Goswami because he's qualified by hearing, and as Srila Prabhupada says, still more qualified by preaching Srimad Bhagavatam so purely. And again, in this purport, these things are, I find this to be, as a matter of fact, yesterday I showed this verse to my husband, this verse in purport. I said, look at the verse that I get to speak on. And he was saying, wow, this verse is in purport. It's really the essence of the teachings that we've received. So this was true thousands of years ago, right? And it's still true today. And Srila Prabhupada's purport, it's very important that he says, only in the last 100 years or so, the rigidity of so-called caste system of India became prominent when disqualified men, Dvija Bandhus, in other words, friends of Brahmins, but not real Brahmins, friends of the higher castes, increased. But now we hear so many people speaking from this perspective. It's so sad and unfortunate. And people condemn Indian culture. They think, oh, in Indian culture, they have this caste system, but it's a complete misunderstanding and perversion of the real system. Lord Chaitanya elevated Haridas Thakur and made him the authority of the glories of the holy name, made him the Namacharya. And what can we learn from the character of Haridas Thakur? He was so humble, right? He didn't try to force himself into the Jagannath temple, and he could chant incessantly all day and night and teach the holy name incessantly due to his humility and his tolerance. Look, he was beaten in 32 marketplaces. And when those men were beating him, they were saying, look, if you don't die, we're going to get in so much trouble from the Kazi. So can you please just die? So he said, oh, if I'm causing you some pain by not dying, I will certainly die. And then he just fainted in ecstasy. And they were happy. They were relieved they weren't going to get in trouble. So they just thought his body was dead, threw him in the Ganges. But then he awakened to consciousness and floated down and just started chanting in some other village downstream. And then everybody realized the great caliber of his devotion. So yeah, it's important for us to know that someone born in a high family who's full of arrogance and pride is disqualified. And yeah, Advaita Acharya, he was the head of the whole Brahmin community of Shantipur, and he honored Haridas Thakur above all the high caste Brahmins. There's a ceremony that Advaita Acharya was performing for his deceased father. It's called the Shraddha ceremony. And at the end of the Shraddha ceremony, the plate of Mahaprasadam that was offered in the yajna is supposed to be offered to the highest caste Brahmin, the most respected Brahmin in the assembly. And Sri Advaita Acharya turned around and gave that to Haridas Thakur. So just imagine how perhaps spiffed some of the caste-conscious Brahmins must have been at that time. But Advaita Acharya was teaching everyone what it means to be qualified to chant the holy name and to preach the holy name. Yeah, and also in this purport, it said that just by seeing a great devotee, such a devotee can purify degraded souls. What to speak of associating with someone like that? Yeah, to be purified by the Ganges, you have to go take a bath. But to be purified by hearing from great souls, you could just see them or hear from them. And another thing that's so important in this purport of Srila Prabhupada, he says that mental diseases today are worse than bodily diseases. And don't we all experience that? So sad, we're hearing day after day after day, another person taking their own life, another suicide, another, high achiever in the university taking his or her life because, oh, I feel like my life is useless. So, or older people, younger people. And in the US today, it said that there's a suicide every 12 minutes or 41,000 suicides every year. So it's such a sad situation. So what does that mean to us? It means that we have to, it's really time, right? We have to really take up, in all seriousness, preaching this saving message of SRIMAD Bhagavatam as soon as possible, because it's the best humanitarian work, and it will really touch people's hearts and change people's hearts if we can communicate that message of SRIMAD Bhagavatam in the mood of Haridas Thakur, in the mood of humble compassion, not in an arrogant way like holier than thou, as they say, or just blasting people, judging people, blaming people. I'm so realized in Krishna consciousness, I can tell you. People are not going to be able to hear from us if we try to communicate this sacred message in that wrong consciousness. Yeah, so Srimad Bhagavatam, this path of Bhagavat Dharma, it's way beyond all mundane Varnashram Dharma. And it's in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see again and again in pastime after pastime how Srimad Bhagavatam uplifts the simple people who have pure devotion and brings down the high and mighty. Again and again, Lord Indra gets humiliated, right, by Krishna or the pure devotees, or Lord Brahma gets bewildered. Or what about the proud yajnik Brahmins who were so learned in the Vedas, but they were missing the whole essence when the cowherd boys came to ask for a little prasadam from the yajna for Krishna and Balaram, but their wives were more advanced than they were. And then, of course, the greatest devotees of all are said to be the gopis of Sri Vrindavan Dham. So, yeah, so when Srila Prabhupada talks about Varnashram Dharma, he's speaking about this divine, Devi Varnashram, not mundane Varnashram. And so many devotees misunderstand this and become proud. Oh, now I'm a Brahmin. I can boss people around. I can judge, stick my proud nose up in the air. and miss the whole point, miss the whole point. But what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita, in 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, this is verses 1855, Krishna explains what is the essence that we're supposed to be trying to get here. He says, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tatvataha tato mam tatvato gyatva visite tad anantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So this is the essence that we are meant to learn, that Srila Prabhupada tried so hard to teach us, right? They're putting up, Sahadev's putting that beautiful verse up on the screen for all of you to see. So yeah, as we practice Krishna consciousness or try to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, we have to so carefully and regularly be taking our own pulse. Like, sometimes they say, doctor, heal thyself. So preacher, heal thyself, right? If we're supposed to be preachers of Krishna consciousness, we need to be taking our own pulse and our own bhakti temperature and see, am I day by day developing more focus on my chanting? Am I crying out to Krishna in humility and tolerance? Am I more conscious in gratefulness for the gifts of the holy name and Shri Guru and Gauranga? And am I becoming more eager to love and serve Krishna and all the devotees, knowing how dear all the devotees are to Krishna? So this is the essence, and this is a cornerstone of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And there's a verse that Srila Prabhupada was actually paraphrasing in the first paragraph of this purport. It's a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a famous verse that Prabhupada quotes again and again that speaks to this essence. And here's the verse in Bengali. Kiba vipra, kiba nyasi, sudra kene nai, ye Krishna tattva veta se guru hai. This is Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 8, chapter 8, verse 128. I don't know if you want to put it on the screen, but the verse says, whether one is a Brahmana, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna. So this is spoken by Lord Chaitanya when he was speaking to Ramananda Roy, or he was really hearing from Ramananda Roy in that pastime. So you might have read that pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a wonderful, long pastime. As a matter of fact, Srila Prabhupada even wrote a little book with just that conversation before he came to the West. And so as the pastime goes, Lord Chaitanya had heard from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya about the pure devotion of Ramananda Roy. And so he was so eager to go there and meet him. And he traveled to the bank of the Godavari River in the province of Madras. And when he first saw Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya was so attracted by his pure devotion that his mind just immediately began running after Ramananda Roy. And when Ramananda Roy looked at Lord Chaitanya, he saw that he was as brilliant as 100 suns. And Ramananda Roy was so struck with wonder. And then he offered his respectful obeisances, and he just fell, boom, flat like a rod on the ground. And when he stood up, Lord Chaitanya asked him, "Are you Ramananda Roy?" Oops, that's not the verse. Let's see. The verse was, let me see. The verse that I quoted was 8:128. Yeah, it's, yeah, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 8, verse 128. It's okay. So anyway, when he stood up, Lord Chaitanya said, "Are you Ramananda Roy?" And Ramananda Roy said, he's so humble. He said, "Yes, I am your very low servant, and I belong to the Shudra community." So humble, And then they just started embracing each other. And they both almost lost consciousness because of their ecstatic love, and they both fell on the ground. And they were having so many ecstatic symptoms were just appearing on their bodies. And of course, we know that Ramananda Roy was actually Krishna's dear Gopi, Radharani's dear assistant Vishaka Devi, and Swarup Damodar was Lalita. So here, Lord Chaitanya is a combination of Radha and Krishna, and this Ramananda Roy was actually the Gopi Vishaka. But so then what happens next in this pastime? When these stereotyped, Prabhupada calls them stereotyped ritualistic brahmanas who were accompanying Ramananda Roy, when they saw this, here's this high caste sannyasi embracing this, what they considered a Shudra, Ramananda Roy, they were struck with wonder, and they started to think, this sannyasi has the luster of the effulgence of Brahman, but now he's crying and embracing a Sudra? And this Ramananda Roy, he's the governor of Madras. He's a highly learned and grave person. He's a great scholar, but he's touching the sannyasi and he's become restless like a madman. So these stereotyped ritualistic brahmanas, they couldn't figure out what was going on. So then Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy, they understood that these people can't figure out what's going on with us, with our intimate relationship. So they kind of checked their ecstasy, because they understood that the minds of these mundane, non-devotee Brahmins who just follow external Vedic rituals, they couldn't access the intimate relationship with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Ramananda Roy was tasting. They had no access because they were just non-devotees. They were stereotyped, ritualistic brahmanas. So then Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy, they decided to check their spiritual emotions, and they regained their sanity, the verses say. And then they made a plan to meet up later without all these outsiders eavesdropping on their intimate conversation. So I think this is really an important pastime. And I want to ask all of you, what are we supposed to learn from this? Is this just a cool story? Or do we also want to access an intimate relationship with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ourselves? Or do we want to just miss the whole point and miss the whole goal of Krishna consciousness and get stuck in pride and external stereotyped rituals of Vedic principles like these outsider Brahmins, right? So that's a really important question that I think we all have to ask ourselves. Do we actually want to enter into the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada? Or do we want to just remain like stereotyped, ritualistic, outsider, mundane, non-devotee Brahmins, licking the outside of the bottle of honey and never, ever tasting the essence? So yeah, there's another cornerstone verse of the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya, and it's Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 4th chapter, 18th verse. And this verse also smashes all mundane conceptions and describes who really does have access to the shelter of the Lord. And I really love this verse. Prabhupada used to quote it quite often. And it's amazing. It's an amazing verse because it actually names so many different countries of the world outside of Vedic India where people like us, like African people and American people, people like us who come from backgrounds and communities. Okay, here's the verse. Sahadev put it up. Yeah, outsiders like us, where we didn't learn the sattvic principles of pure Krishna consciousness. And here's what the verse describes. So the Kiratas, or the Aborigines, the Hunandras, which means the Hungarians, the people of Andhra, way in South India, Pulindra, the Greeks, Pulkasa, Abira, Samba, Yavana, the Turks, Kasadaya, the Chinese, basically everybody outside of Vedic India, right? And the verse says, and even others who are addicted to sinful acts like us, like me, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord due to the Lord being the Prabha Vishnu, or the supreme power. So yeah, by taking shelter of his devotees, we can have access, even though we're so unqualified. And I think this is so, so important for us to understand. And this is the mercy of the pure devotees of the Lord, who travel around the world just to give fallen people like us access to this authentic path of bhakti, the pure Bhagavat Dharma, which is so much beyond mundane Varnashram Dharma, so that we too can take full shelter of the all-powerful Lord and his all-powerful devotees. And there's still another verse that Srila Prabhupada on the same point, making the same point that Srila Prabhupada would quote all the time, that starts off with this line, Arche Vishnu Shiladi, Gurusu Naramati, Vaishnave Jati Budhir. It says that anyone who considers the deity of the Supreme Lord to be made of stone or wood or metal, or considers the spiritual master to be an ordinary person, or the Vaishnav devotee to be coming from some material caste or country, all of these kinds of misunderstandings indicate a hellish mentality. So yeah, I feel like we have to ask ourselves, do we want to live in hell and have a hellish mentality? Or do we want to access the real essence of pure bhakti, the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, the essence of the teachings of Srila Prabhupada traveled so far and took on so many headaches just to give this to us. So yeah, so in conclusion, I want to say that Lord Chaitanya, and you all probably know this verse, Naham Vipra Nachanara Pati. Yeah, that he said, I'm not a Brahmin. I'm not a Kshatriya or Vaishya or Sudra or Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha or Sannyasi. But what was he? He says, I'm not any of these things. Externally, he was, right? Externally, he was born in a Brahmin family. Externally, he was a sannyasi. But rather, he considered himself in his heart to be a servant of a servant of a servant of Krishna, who is the maintainer of the gopis. So this is what we're meant to learn. This is what Lord Chaitanya was trying to get through our thick, proud heads. And yeah, so who do I consider myself to be? Some false identity or position. I'm the temple president. I'm the temple commander. I just command everybody. Or I'm so this or that, some designation. Or am I praying to see myself in that way as a tiny servant of the servant of a servant of Krishna, who's lovingly maintaining the gopis and all those who love him so much. So these are a few thoughts on this wonderful verse. And thank you so much for once again inviting me. And I want to ask all of you, what was important for you here, and what can you reflect back so that we can maybe all remember a little better. What did we hear? Anything that was important for you or was inspiring, or anything that you would like to share with someone else today or tomorrow? Let me see, somebody put something in the chat here. That window, Sriman Haraha Acharya, that window was where low castes were allowed to have darshan of the deity. And now, since Krishna turned his face to the window and his back to the main door, it has become the main access for everyone to have his darshan. Isn't that the most beautiful story? You can still go there today and have to go and peek through the window, because he didn't care about the people who were coming in the front door. He was, like usually, I'll tell you a story, actually. I'll tell you a story, and then I'm going to ask for your input. But let me just share this story. Radhanath Swami was visiting the Chicago temple, and he asked one lady who met him there, he said, what is your service here at the temple? And she said, I take care of the garden, but probably you didn't see it because you came in the back door and the garden is in the front. And Radhanath Swami said something really important. He said, yes, servants come in the back door. So, so what are all your thoughts? What can you share? What can you reflect back that was important for you here about all of this that we discussed?
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mother Rukmini Devi. So many amazing lessons. It's amazing because I had a few number of questions before you started speaking. And I must say, like 95% of them have already been answered. Even though I haven't asked, yes, they've all been answered.
Thank you. That's a good score. Thank you. Usually you have a ton of questions. Pretty good.
Yeah, I had tons of
Mercy
questions.
of Prabhupada. Thank you.
So, dear devotees, please kindly unmute, and you don't need to raise your hand, just unmute and share your realizations and what you've learned so far from today's class so that it might benefit all of us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Rukmini, and everybody.
Oh, that's Gail from New York.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Haribo, Gail.
New
Gail
York,
from
New York, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
Haribo.
Yeah. Is a question okay, or do you just want reflections now?
You can do whichever one you want. Maybe you can reflect something back and ask a question. So
Okay. Well, actually, I think my reflection is embedded in my question.
Okay, that's good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So we understand that the real value of a person is their mentality toward Krishna, not the particular body in which they were born. So I guess it's because I've never known anything other than ISKCON. I'm wondering what the value is of quote unquote high birth. Is the value that, you get to perform certain Vedic rituals if you have high birth, like if you're born into a Brahmin family, or if you're born into a Kshatriya family. So outside of God consciousness, what is the actual value of quote unquote high birth?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So actually the point of the high birth is Krishna consciousness, and how much someone regards Krishna, but not only Krishna, but every living being who's part and parcel of Krishna. So you can understand, like, say your mother and father are both doctors. You grow up in a house where that the doctoring is all around you, or maybe your parents are engineers, maybe you have a tendency to become an engineer too, but you can't get a job as an engineer by saying, oh, my mother and father are engineers, or you can't actually go in a hospital and do surgery. If you walk in the operating room and say, yeah, my dad is a great surgeon, my mother is a great gynecologist. No, you actually have to go to medical school, study with a person who knows the science, and then become qualified. So there is a tendency to kind of, imbibe what you learn at home, but we have to act in that way. We have to actually cultivate the mentality. It's judged by our behavior. Like I was listening to a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Well, first of all, I was listening to a lecture by Srila Prabhupada the other day, and he was talking about how in Calcutta, there's some Brahmins that they just work in the slaughterhouse, and their job is to bless the slaughtered animals, to offer them to the goddess Kali, so that people think that when they eat meat, they're eating this prasad of the goddess Kali. And he was saying, this is not the business of a Brahmin to be working in a slaughterhouse. Brahmins are supposed to teach and recite Vedic literature and understand Vedic literature. So, if we don't do the action, or sometimes Prabhupada would talk about how there was a certain man, Mr. Goswami, who was working in the post office in Vrindavan, and everyone was calling him Panditji. So a Brahmin is understood by the quality and by the work, not just by the name or the birth. And another point is that Gandhi, Prabhupada would sometimes talk about how Gandhi was rubber stamping the lowborn people as the Harijans. Harijan means it means devotee, a beloved of Lord Hari. So Srila Prabhupada was making the point that we can't just rubber stamp. Rubber stamp, what does that mean? You get a stamp and say, oh, okay, I stamp you, you're a devotee, you're a Harijan, you're a beloved to Krishna. No, by our actions, by our behavior, by what we do and what we love, really. We have to become beloved to Krishna, not just by some political gesture for political purposes. No, so it's about change of heart, and that's what Srila Prabhupada is trying to teach us. So I hope that helps to answer your question. You know, being in a family of such and such, you have more access to whatever it is, but doesn't mean that you're then qualified. So yeah, and yeah.
Yeah, so therefore, those who have high birth, but their heart isn't, let's say, directed toward God consciousness, their high birth actually becomes meaningless, isn't it?
It becomes actually a detriment because they become proud and their noses are sticking up in the air. And Srila Prabhupada in that Chaitanya Charitamrita purport that I was quoting, he calls them stereotyped, ritualistic, non-devotee followers, so-called followers of Vedic principles, but they're not actually qualified. I might have told this one story here before, but I want to share a story that I love. It's about someone, this is an ancient story. So these are things are not made up by me, by an American woman in the 21st century. This is an ancient story about someone named Satyakant. I think I've told it before, but it's worth telling again. So there was a little boy, and he wanted to study with a great Brahmin teacher. So he went to the great teacher and he said, I would like to study with you, sir, please. And the great Brahmin teacher said, like as they traditionally would, oh, well, who is your father? And the little boy said, I don't actually know who my father is. I'll have to go ask my mother. So he ran back to his village and he asked his mother, who is my father? I don't know who my father is. And his mother, maybe she was a prostitute, you know, something, but she said, I've had so many men. I don't really know who your father is. So this little boy was so honest that he ran back to the great Brahmin teacher and he told him, he said, I asked my mother and she said, she doesn't know who my father is. And so then the great Brahmin teacher was so realized, he said, I accept you as my student. Why? Because you have the qualifications to learn, because you are very honest. So you have the aptitude to learn Vedic literature, because why? Because you are so honest and you are so humble. Whereas someone born in a Brahmin family, maybe they're proud and they're so disqualified. So I love that story. I hope you like that story too. It's a really, it goes to the essence. What else? Would somebody else like to reflect back something that they heard today?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, but what you just ended on about this poor guy who didn't know who his father was and being honest to the spiritual master. Didn't you have the same experience repeat itself? I think one of your god brothers also had the same situation with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada became his father. I heard in his passport, his father's name is Srila Prabhupada.
Wow, I never heard that story before. But
okay. He actually shared it as in one of Srila Prabhupada's memories.
Wow,
because he's an Indian by birth.
Wow.
So like history repeats itself.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that story.
Beautiful. So in fact, you know, Srila Prabhupada is your father, your grandfather, my father, grandfather.
Yeah.
If we embrace his teachings, but if we reject it and just stay stuck in false pride, I'm such a great African, I'm such a great American, I'm a man, I'm better than women, I'm a woman, I'm better than men, or whatever our pride is, whatever our designation is, then we're disqualified, you know? Yeah. What else? Can somebody reflect something back that they heard?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I was thinking, because this has been, I would say, a little bit of a bone of contention on this platform some time ago, because some devotees were saying that apart from it being like Hare Krishna devotee, it's impossible to go back to the kingdom of God. And some of us were saying that we should not be speaking like that.
Yeah.
So I hope that everybody heard what you said. As I'm saying that you answered lots of my questions, because I wanted to ask you this question, but you already answered in your lecturing that should not even be our consideration, you know?
Yeah, actually in
But
the purport to the verse, I want to run in the other room and get this book. Can you hang on 1 second? Because
yes,
I want
please do.
Srila Prabhupada's own words, just a second.
Yeah, please do. Hare Krishna.
Sahade, while she's getting the book, can you repeat what was said?
Okay, what was said is that, excuse me, you know, she quoted all different people from all over the world. Once they dedicated their lives to Krishna, to the ways of the Lord, they all will be accepted.
Yeah, and so here's the part I wanted to read. So this is in the purport to the verse I quoted, the one where Krishna names, Sukadev Goswami names all these different people from different parts of the world. It's such a great verse. So in this very long purport, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, he says, the above mentioned historical names are different nations of the world. Even those who are constantly engaged in sinful acts are all corrigible, that means correctable, to the standard of perfect human beings if they take shelter of the devotees of the Lord. And then get this, Prabhupada says this many places. He says, Jesus Christ and Muhammad, two powerful devotees of the Lord, have done tremendous service on behalf of the Lord on the surface of the globe. And from the version of Srila Sukadev Goswami, it appears that instead of running a godless civilization in the present context of the world situation, he goes on to explain that if the leaders of the world, take shelter of the devotees of the Lord, and these are the two he mentions, Muhammad and Jesus Christ. So it's very sectarian when devotees of ISKCON think, yes, you have to be saying Jai Prabhupada and Hare Krishna to be on the path of devotion, because in fact, these are great, great teachers of the holy name, great saints, and so many. These are not the only two. Let's see. Yeah, so many great saints who are teaching the path of pure devotion that we can learn from. Yeah. So, yeah. What else? Somebody else have?
So much.
Yeah.
Any reflection from anyone, please? Kindly unmute. This is like a family sangha. So please share.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, Mother, I was thinking, what at all happened to Karna? Because Karna is like the big brother to the Pandavas. And so now he is considered a suitor. And no, even at that time, no woman even wanted to hear his name. No woman wanted to see him. And even though that was not the case. So I've been wondering how in life, sometimes certain things you haven't done, you haven't said, maybe leveled against you, and there is no way to free yourself. In such a situation, what do? Do you just depend on Krishna? Because you've done everything, you've tried everything, and still nothing is working. Karna is a big example.
Yeah, well, you see what happened. He's the first son of Kunti Devi, even before Yudhishthira, right? Yeah. But the fact is, there was some destiny going on there. And my son Gauravani says, if everyone does what they're supposed to do, then there's no story. So sometimes, but what happened was he took shelter of the wrong person. Yeah. He even toward the end, Krishna came to him. Kunti Devi, his own mother, came and revealed that she was his mother. Krishna came, but he couldn't take shelter of Krishna at that point. He took shelter of the friendship of Duryodhana. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think, that's the essential lesson for us to learn. where are we taking shelter? Who am I hanging out with? Who are my friends? Who are the people I take shelter of? Who are the people I hear from and learn from? And that's going to color my consciousness. If I sit in the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM class because it's required or I'm supposed to, and then go out and do some nonsense, then Krishna will see both, and he will help us still. Sometimes he might have to give us some hard knocks on the what do they call the street of the hard knocks of the school of life, whatever. But so yeah, try to take shelter in a proactive way of the devotees of the Lord. And if you keep looking for someone who resonates with you, maybe you may not be able to resonate with every single person in your temple, but sometimes the person doing the most humble service is the most realized person. You might think, oh, the temple president's a little bit mean to me. Well, go talk to the person who's sweeping the temple floor, and maybe that person will, have more realization. So it's not about position. It's not about anything. It's about, who do you love, and where do we take shelter, and where do we place our love? And yeah. What else? Anybody have any reflections at all today?
Shumavara Prabhu, are you still here? Salika Prabhu?
No, actually, I'm driving.
Oh, you're driving. Okay. All right. Okay. So, Mother, I have a question.
Okay.
And my question has to do with, excuse me, with we trying to be devotees. I've asked this question before, maybe once or twice to different people. But when we read the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, it seemed to me that it is the same persons coming over and over and over to enact this pastime. Like you just read Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy is a gopi. Now he is in a male's body. And because his real nature is a gopi, that's why he was able to guide the drama. He himself will be dressing the women. No, a man cannot dress a woman like that, especially in this Kali Yuga. So I've been wondering if someone like me, very raw, who's never had any interaction with the Lord, if I can look at these pastimes and take some sort of inspiration from them that, okay, this person was a low-class person, and eventually he became a great devotee of the Lord. So I can also become as such. Sometimes it kind of discourages me because I believe that, okay, he was already pure devotee, and then he assumed such a role to play a pastime for us to know that there is such a possibility, but I might not be able to get there. What's your advice?
I think take shelter of the Prabha Vishnu, the all-powerful Supreme Lord. And I think it's a very beautiful thing to think, I have no qualification, let me just cry and chant. And then regard the other devotees that are around me. I don't know who this person was, previously. Let me not judge. So don't exist in humility that I have no qualification. But when I look around me, just assume everyone else was had many spiritual credits before coming to this life, So I think that's a good consciousness for a devotee, to be thinking, I have no qualification, but everyone around me, who knows who they were in their last life, Yeah, so I think sometimes we try to figure things out in our teeny brains, and the best thing is to just try to love and serve and take shelter and to chant the holy name in why? What's the impetus? Like, are we chanting because our guru told us to, or we're supposed to, or we're getting free from sins, or to try to chant out of gratitude that my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, saved me from a hellish destination. So to chant the holy name in gratitude and not try to figure everything out in my brain, because that may not be possible. Generally, it's not possible, you know. But I think that's a good answer, though. Accept everyone else as having come from some higher realization, and myself without qualifications, and not trying to figure it out.
Right. Thank you so much, Mother.
Okay. I think we're done.
If I may ask another question, does anyone have something to say? But it's interesting. If I may put the text on the screen, it's interesting. The sages, no, this is Sutta Goswami speaking. Oh God, although we are born in a mixed caste, we are still promoted in birthright simply by serving and following the great who are advanced in knowledge. This is where I have my question. Those who are advanced in knowledge. This is English, and in Sanskrit, we know we have Jnana, which is knowledge, and then Vijnana, which is like practical knowledge. Now, there are some people who have the brain to study, to retain, and know what they have studied. There are others who may not have such a gift. And I also read that Lord Chaitanya was very much pleased with Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, because he knew how to preach, and he also knew how to live what he was preaching. And I realized that oftentimes we stress more on knowledge, knowing the scriptures, and do not talk much or do not emphasize much on the practicality. For example, in ISKCON, before someone takes a sannyasi or becomes an initiating guru, there are tests, like theoretical tests that they have to do. Do we also consider the practical practice of an individual devotee? Because there may be some devotees who may not be educated, they may not be able to read and quote slokas, but their life is the embodiment of the scripture. Do we consider such devotees also, like like in the life of Gorakishore Das Babaji, for example, he is like completely opposite to his disciple, Bhaktisiddhanta. But Bhaktisiddhanta approached him, and he was even ready to commit suicide if he wasn't going to accept him as a disciple. So I would like you to maybe throw a little bit more light on how important it is to try to become like Haridas Thakur. We preach, and at the same time we practice.
Yeah,
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, because we're meant to become essence seekers. We're not meant to be, loitering around in the outside of the essence, licking the outside of the bottle of honey. So it's very good if we can learn and study, but the essence is that change of heart, taking shelter of Krishna. Of course, Lord Chaitanya said the real scholar of Bhagavad Gita was that one who was crying, holding Bhagavad Gita, looking at the picture of Krishna driving the chariot of Arjuna, and everyone in his community was standing around laughing at him because he wasn't pronouncing the Sanskrit properly. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, you are the real scholar of Bhagavad Gita. So this is what we're meant to learn. And it's great if we have the capacity to learn what we can. But sometimes by trying, we also get more capacity. There's a nice story I just heard the other day about the disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. He was a very pure devotee. His name was, what was his name? I forget his name actually, but anyway, he was a disciple of, he's the one who used to carry Jagannath Das Babaji around in a basket. He was a strong, stout man. And Jagannath Das Babaji was like 145 years old, and he was very decrepit and bent over. So his disciple used to carry him. So once his guru, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, said to him, please, Bihari, I think it was Bihari, I think his name Bihari, please, can you please read to me from SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM? I mean, from Chaitanya Charitamrita. And the disciple said, Guru Maharaj, you know that I'm illiterate. I can't read at all. I can't read Bengali. I can't read anything. And so Jagannath Das Babaji, he was such a pure disciple, this disciple, Bihari? I think it was Bihari. Anyway, he was such a pure devotee. His guru said, look at the words, look at each word on the page, and Krishna will give you the ability. It's an amazing story. But he was looking at the words and studying the words, and gradually Krishna gave him the ability to read, and he would read Chaitanya Charitamrita to his Guru Maharaj, and he got that ability by the grace of Krishna. What do they say? The combined grace of Guru Krishna Kripai Pai, right? Bhakti Latabi. So he was given that ability to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita by the grace of his Guru and Krishna. So, you know, if we have a strong desire for the essence of Krishna consciousness, Krishna can carry what we lack. Isn't that what he says? That he'll carry what we lack. But it shouldn't be that we're looking for external things. We want to be looking for that essence. And I think that's the important point here. So there's one thing in the chat. I think we addressed all the questions. Let's see. Yes, I have come across that pastime as well. Yeah. Nice. So many beautiful stories that point to the essence. So we're really fools and rascals if we just stay stuck on the externals, stereotype rituals of non-devotees. No, we have to go to the essence. So we have to try to imbibe that in our communities, learn it, teach it, practice it, share it, and give an example of being essence seekers. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, Saragrahi, essence seeker, right? So thank you. I think we're done with.
Thank you so much. We have Bob. Yeah, please, you may unmute Bob.
Sorry, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. This is Hassan from Spain.
Oh, Hassan, okay.
Yes, because
Hare
if I used to
Krishna.
use this name, that's why it came here.
Okay.
Sorry if the lines is breaking because it's raining here. And I have this something which is bothering me and I want to share it here. If I'll have some answers or any help. I think like 2-3 months ago, something's happened here in Barcelona. There was a Swami who came here in Barcelona, and one of the devotees invited me to the program. So this Swami, I didn't know exactly who he is, but normally if a Swami came here, he has to go to ISKCON temple, but this Swami came very close to where I live. So the devotees who came very close to me, I have to take them to the program. So I was assisted and some slept in my house. So the next day, I have to take one of the devotees to the Swami's house where he stays. So when I went there, ignorantly, he asked me to come and sit down. And he asked one of his devotees to give me a japa to wear because I went there with a tracksuit. So before I knew, initiation was going on. And for me not to disrespect him, I was not be able to say no. So everything went on, and he said he has to do a quick initiation. So after that, I was a bit confused. So I talked to my teacher in Bhakti Sastra, and he called my Guru Maharaj, who I have already taken shelter on him, and he says, no, this is wrong. So I have to return the japa to him and ask him for forgiveness. So I was very, very confused because I think every Swami is a Swami, you know. So when I returned the japa to him, he was like convincing me to keep it And I told him, no, I've already taken shelter in ISKCON, so I cannot accept this Jaffa. But he took my telephone number, and every day he's sending me a message. So my problem is that my Guru Maharaj said I have to forget him, and I asked him what is the difference between them. He just told me you have to forget about him. But my problem is every day he sent me a message, and this message is full of transcendental, you know.
Mhm.
And I don't know what to do. Do I block him, or should I continue receiving his messages? Because I don't want to, I feel like I'm disrespecting him. Because when he came with a picture of Bhakti Siddhanta Swami, who is a spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. So I'm very bit confused, because I don't want to do something like I'm disrespecting him, because when I give him the japa back, he says something like to me that maybe he's not wealthy, you know. So this words always, it keeps coming to me like maybe I've offended him, or I've been disrespected him, and if I block him, maybe it will be more offensive. So what should I do in this situation?
Thank you very much for asking me this question. Thank you for opening your heart. And I think, in my humble opinion, I think it would be the right thing for you to block him, because I think he behaved to you in a tricky way. He was being tricky, and we want to
Okay.
look for people to hear from who are very simple, straightforward, honest, and authentic. So you are already taking shelter of some other Siksha gurus and taking shelter in ISKCON. It sounds to me like he was behaving in a tricky way. And in my humble opinion, you should block him, because you don't want to be further confused. We want to hear from the simple, authentic, straightforward way, not to be tricked and by people who are. It sounds duplicitous to me. It sounds
Okay.
not straightforward. So that would be my humble suggestion to you. And thank you for asking.
Can I just input one thing? My understanding is that disciple-guru relationship is, a two-way street, not one way. So I'm thinking that, a relationship, disciple-guru relationship cannot be established only by just one person,
Yeah,
they both have to be in agreement,
right?
It's not something you can dictate.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. It's not that somebody comes and with magic tricks will come and bamboozle you, trick you, and with some magic trick. No, you've already been hearing, you've already been developing faith from the people who you've been hearing from, the people you have relationship with. We have to hear from those people who are simple, straightforward, authentic, and representing Srila Prabhupada's line, Srila Prabhupada's the one who traveled to Africa 4 times, the one who traveled around the world 13 times, reaching out to all of us so selflessly. So yeah, nice point, Gail. It's a reciprocation. It's not about being tricked and bamboozled by somebody who knows a lot of flowery words. Thank you. Is that good? Should we close there?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mother Rukmini. Thank you for the answer to Bhakta Hassan's concern. And I think as ignorant as I am, I totally agree with what you said. The best thing for him is to block him.
Yeah.
So he doesn't inadvertently commit any offense to him.
Yeah.
And what Mother Gail was saying, I actually wanted to say that because the disciple is never forced into accepting initiation. It is a husband and wife relationship. The woman loves the man loves the woman. The spiritual master accepts the disciple, and the disciple also wants to accept the spiritual master as his spiritual master. But in this case, it's only one-sided, which is not bona fide. So thank you.
Nice.
I think Harichakra, probably you're going to be the last person because brother has to leave. Harichakra, probably please unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Mother Rukmini, thank you very much. Always when you speak, it's like you choke off all my questions because whatever I'm trying to plan, I'm planning to ask. By the time you're done with your class, my answer, I already get my answers. So thank you very much for always appearing on this forum and giving us all these transcendental messages. And it really goes deep in the heart, and it makes us realize how practical you are too. I mean, most of the time you try to give this Krishna consciousness in a practical way that goes with our everyday life.
Thank you so much.
It's easier to hear from people like you who bring Krishna consciousness to the level of practical life. Unlike
thank you for hearing with a wide open heart. So I'd like to close with one nice thing Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said, I am a nonsense, but somehow this boy has developed faith in me. So Krishna, please help me to guide him. So, wow. So thank you. Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all for your faith.
That's a very beautiful note to end on. And Srila Prabhupada's humility.
Yes, thank you.
So dear devotees, please kindly unmute and we all chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to Mother Rukmini for being here today. And Mother Rukmini, if you paid attention, today is the 18th and your verse was 18. So it's a very beautiful day.
Chapter 18, verse
18. Chapter is also 18.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that. So,
chapter 18.
Beautiful.
Verse 18 and the 18th.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you all. Thank
Grace,
you.
Mother Rukmini Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
Srila Prabhupada bless you all.